You send the message. You tell yourself it does not matter. You tell yourself you are busy. You have things to do. You are not the kind of person who waits by a phone. You lock the screen. You put it face down. You pick up a book. You read one sentence. You put the book down. You unlock the screen. Nothing. You check the time. 3 minutes have passed. You lock it again. You open an app. You scroll without seeing. You close the app. You check again. Still nothing. You start to wonder. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are with someone. Maybe they saw it and chose not to respond. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe the tone was off. Maybe you were too much. Maybe you were not enough. You reread what you sent. It was fine. Was it fine? You check again, and again, and again, and again, until the phone is no longer a device. It is a verdict, a judge, a scale weighing your worth in real time. And every time the screen stays dark, the verdict feels a little more final. If you have ever been held hostage by a silence that should not matter this much, this is for you. This channel goes where the comfortable psychology stops. Subscribe if you are ready to understand why someone else's reply has become the measure of your own existence. The uncomfortable question. Why does a simple notification have this much power over your mood? Why can one person's silence ruin an entire afternoon? Why does a 2-inch screen become the center of your emotional universe the moment you send a message to someone specific? The obvious answer is that you care about them, that you want connection, that you are human, and humans need response. But this is not the real answer. The real answer is darker. The real answer is that you are not waiting for a text. You are waiting for relief. You are waiting for the small electronic beep that tells you that you are real, that you exist in someone else's mind, that you have not been forgotten, that you are wanted, that you are safe. The message is not a message. It is medication. And the silence is not silence. It is withdrawal. This is the question most people avoid. They treat the checking as a habit, as a minor compulsion, as something they will grow out of when they get busier or more mature. But the checking is not the problem. The checking is the symptom. The problem is that you have outsourced your emotional regulation to another person's behavior. You have made someone else responsible for your sense of being wanted. And that arrangement is older than the phone. The phone is just the latest delivery system for a dependency that began long before you had a screen to stare at. Jung and the screen Carl Jung understood something about human relationships that explains this perfectly. He called it projection. The psyche does not see other people clearly. It sees them through a lens of its own contents. Hopes, fears, desires, wounds, expectations, all projected outward onto the blank screen of the other person. The other is never just the other. They are always also a canvas. And what you paint on that canvas reveals more about you than it does about them. When you send a message and wait for a reply, you are not just interacting with a person. You are interacting with a psychological construction. The person you are waiting for is not merely a human being with their own schedule, their own distractions, their own inner life. They have become a repository for your needs. They carry your hope for connection, your fear of abandonment, your fantasy of being chosen, your terror of being ignored. They are no longer just someone you texted. They are a mirror. And the reply you are waiting for is not information. It is reflection. It is proof that the image you have projected onto them is being returned. Jung saw projection everywhere. In love, in hatred, in obsession, in indifference. The person who fascinates us is rarely fascinating in themselves. They are fascinating because they activate something in our unconscious. They touch a wound or a wish or a denied part of ourselves. And once that activation happens, we stop seeing them. We see only what they represent. The text message is the smallest possible stage for this drama. But the drama is enormous. Because in that tiny exchange, you are not asking for a reply. You are asking for confirmation that your inner world is real, that the feelings you have projected are not just yours alone, that the connection you imagine actually exists. The hidden fear silence creates a gap, and the unconscious mind cannot tolerate gaps. It must fill them. This is not a choice. It is a reflex. The moment a reply does not arrive, the mind begins to write stories, not about the other person, about you. They are busy, becomes they are losing interest. They did not see it becomes they saw it and ignored it. They're with friends becomes they're with someone better. The stories are never neutral. They are always prosecutions. The unconscious is not trying to understand the silence. It is trying to explain the silence in a way that confirms what it already believes. And what it already believes is that you are not enough, that you are forgettable, that you are replaceable, that you are in some fundamental way undeserving of the attention you are craving. This is the hidden fear. Not that they will not reply, but that their silence is a verdict, a judgment on your worth, a confirmation of your deepest suspicion about yourself, the suspicion that you are too much, or too little, or too boring, or too intense, or too damaged, or too ordinary, the suspicion that if people really knew you, they would drift away, and the silence feels like the beginning of that drift. It feels like evidence that the mask has slipped, that the real you peeked through the message, and the real you was found wanting. Jung understood that the unconscious is not objective. It is not a camera. It is a storyteller, and the stories it tells are shaped by complexes, emotional knots formed around early wounds. The child who was ignored learns that attention is conditional. The child who was abandoned learns that love is temporary. The child who had to earn affection learns that presence must be purchased. These lessons become the lens through which all later silence is interpreted. The adult who waits for a reply is not just an adult with a phone. They are a child with a wound, staring at a dark screen, waiting for a parent who may not come. The addiction of checking the phone is not curiosity, it is compulsion, and compulsion follows a very specific architecture. Anxiety rises. You check. For a split second, uncertainty is reduced. The screen is dark, but at least you know it is dark. The checking provides a microdose of control. You cannot make them reply, but you can know whether they have replied, and in the absence of power, knowing feels like power. Then the anxiety rises again. The uncertainty creeps back. The mind generates a new scenario, a darker one. You check again. The cycle repeats. Each check is a small transaction. You trade a moment of presence for a moment of temporary relief, and like all addictive cycles, the relief diminishes while the compulsion intensifies. You check more often. You check in more places. You check while driving. You check while talking to other people. You check in the middle of the night. The phone becomes a slot machine, and the reply is the jackpot. But most of the time you lose, and the losing makes you play again. Jung would recognize this as the ego's attempt to manage the uncontrollable. The ego hates uncertainty. It hates not knowing. It hates the open future, so it creates rituals, patterns of behavior that give the illusion of influence. Checking the phone is a ritual. It is a magical act. The unconscious logic is, if I check enough times, I will make the reply appear. If I monitor the situation closely enough, I will prevent the abandonment I fear. This is not rational. But it is powerful, because it addresses the felt sense of helplessness. The checking says, I am doing something, even when there is nothing to do. The tragedy is that the checking makes the waiting worse. Each check reinforces the importance of the reply. It tells the psyche, this matters enormously. This is a matter of survival. And the psyche responds accordingly. It escalates. The anxiety deepens. The obsession tightens. The person who checks once every hour suffers less than the person who checks once every minute. Not because the situation is different, but because the ritual of checking has trained the nervous system to treat the silence as an emergency. The deeper issue. At the center of all of this is a displacement. You have made another person's behavior the thermostat for your internal weather. Their reply is warmth. Their silence is cold. Their speed is love. Their delay is distance. You have given them the keys to your emotional state, and you have done this because you do not trust yourself to hold your own worth. External validation is not a preference. It is a dependency. When you need someone's reply to feel okay, You are not in relationship. You are in transaction. You are offering your attention in exchange for their confirmation. And the exchange rate is terrible. Because the confirmation never lasts. The reply arrives. You feel relief for a moment. Then the need returns. You need another reply. And another. The hunger is not satisfied by feeding. It is deepened. Because the real hunger is not for their attention. It is for your own. Jung's psychology is built on the idea of the self, not the ego, not the persona, the self, the totality of what you are, the center that holds. The problem with outsourcing your worth is that it disconnects you from this center. You are no longer living from the inside out. You are living from the outside in. Your feelings are not responses to your own reality. They are reactions to someone else's choices. You have become a satellite orbiting a planet that may not even know you exist. This is the loneliness that no relationship can fix. Because it is not caused by absence. It is caused by self-abandonment. You left yourself in order to wait for someone else. You stopped being present in your own life in order to monitor whether you are present in theirs. And the more you do this, the more you need the reply, because the reply is the only thing that reminds you that you are still here. The shadow of the weight. There are parts of this experience that are hard to admit, not because they are shameful, but because they are vulnerable, and the ego does not like vulnerability. The ego likes to believe that you are above this, that you are rational, that you are independent, that you do not need anyone, but the shadow knows the truth. The shadow knows that you want attention, not connection, attention. The specific, focused gaze of another person confirming that you are visible. The shadow knows that you are jealous, not of a specific rival, of anyone who might receive what you are waiting for. The shadow knows that you are terrified of abandonment, not because this person is so important, but because abandonment echoes an older loss that was never grieved. The shadow knows that you need to feel special, not loved, special, chosen, preferred, distinct from the ordinary mass of people who do not get this kind of attention. The shadow knows that you fear being replaceable, that somewhere inside you believe everyone would be fine without you, that your absence would not be noticed, that you are in the end optional. These are not character flaws. They are human realities. The Jungian approach is not to shame them. It is to make them conscious, to stop pretending that you are waiting because you are a good communicator, or because you are just checking, or because everyone does it. To admit that you are waiting because some part of you is still a child standing in a doorway, wondering if anyone is coming home. The shadow does not disappear when you ignore it. It grows. It takes over. It turns a phone into a courtroom and a silence into a sentence. The only way to reduce its power is to look at it directly. To say, yes, this is what I want. This is what I fear. This is what I need. And to hold those needs without letting them run the show. If this is making you uncomfortable, that is the point. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep going, where the easy psychology stops. The turning point. The goal is not to become cold. It is not to pretend you do not care. It is not to train yourself into some kind of emotional stoicism where you are indifferent to the people you love. That is not growth. That is another form of defense. Another wall. Another way of avoiding the wound rather than healing it. The goal is to care without surrendering your center. To want the reply without needing it to survive. To feel the disappointment of silence without letting that disappointment rewrite your identity. To hold the desire for connection alongside the knowledge that your worth does not depend on whether this specific person responds in this specific hour. This is the difference between desire and dependency. Desire is human. Dependency is a prism. Desire says, I would like to hear from them. Dependency says, I cannot be okay until I do. Desire allows you to live your life while you wait. Dependency stops your life until the waiting is over. The turning point is not the moment you stop wanting. It is the moment you stop needing the wanting to be resolved in order to feel like yourself. Jung believed that the psyche moves toward wholeness. But wholeness requires a center, a self that is not blown around by every external wind. When you are centered, a delayed reply is just a delayed reply. It is not a verdict. It is not a prophecy. It is not evidence of your unlovability. It is simply a fact, and fact can be held without being dramatized. The centered person still checks their phone, but they do not check it compulsively. They do not check it desperately. They check it the way they check the weather, with interest, but without existential stakes. The practice of uncertainty. How do you get there? Not by willpower, not by telling yourself to stop caring, by changing your relationship with the uncertainty that drives the compulsion. First, stop rereading the conversation. This is a form of self-torture disguised as analysis. You are not looking for information. You are looking for the mistake that explains the silence, and you will always find one. Because any message can be read critically if you are determined to read it that way. The rereading reinforces the belief that you did something wrong, that the silence is your fault, that if you had just phrased it differently, everything would be fine. This is magical thinking. The reply is not delayed because of your wording. It is delayed because the other person has their own life, their own timing, their own reasons that have nothing to do with you. Stop looking for the error. There probably is not one, and even if there is, it does not justify the obsession. Second, stop inventing explanations. The mind hates not knowing, so it manufactures narratives. They are busy. They are angry. They are with someone else. They are losing interest. They are playing games. They are hurt. They are dead in a ditch. The explanations multiply because the uncertainty is intolerable. But explanations are not knowledge. They are fiction, and the fiction is always written to confirm your worst fears. When you catch yourself inventing, stop. Say, I do not know. And let that be enough. The ability to tolerate not knowing is the exact muscle that compulsive checking has atrophied. You rebuild it by refusing to fill the gap with story. Third, stop repeatedly checking the phone. This is the behavior that feeds the anxiety, not the other way around. You think you check because you are anxious, but you are anxious because you check. Each check is a reinforcement. It tells your nervous system that this is an emergency, that survival depends on the contents of this screen. The way to reduce the anxiety is to lengthen the intervals. To check once an hour instead of once a minute. To put the phone in another room. To turn off notifications for this specific thread. These are not tricks. They are training. They are teaching the body that the absence of a reply is not a threat, that the world does not end when the screen stays dark. Fourth, notice the physical anxiety before you act on it. The compulsion to check begins in the body, a tightness in the chest, a flutter in the stomach, a restlessness in the hands. Most people do not notice this. They just reach for the phone. The practice is to pause, to feel the sensation without responding to it, to let the anxiety exist without immediately resolving it. This is uncomfortable, but it is the heart of the work. The anxiety is not a signal to check. It is a signal that you are uncomfortable with uncertainty, and the only way to become comfortable with uncertainty is to let it be uncertain. Fifth, ask the real question. Not, why have they not replied? But, what am I actually afraid this silence means? This question turns the spotlight from them to you. It reveals the complex, the wound, the belief that is being activated. Maybe you are afraid it means you are forgettable. Maybe you are afraid it means you are too much. Maybe you are afraid it means you will be alone. Whatever the answer, it is not about the text. It is about you. And once you know what you are afraid of, you can hold that fear instead of letting it drive you to the phone. The moment. It loses power. There is a moment. It does not come from insight. It comes from repetition, from practicing the pause, from tolerating the uncertainty, from catching the projection and withdrawing it, from meeting the shadow and recognizing it as yours. Slowly, the reply loses its charge. It becomes what it actually is, a message, a piece of communication, not a mirror, not a medication, not a verdict. The moment you stop needing someone's reply to tell you how you feel about yourself, the message loses its power over you. This is not indifference. You still want to hear from them. You still prefer connection to silence. But your okayness is no longer collateral in the exchange. You are okay before the reply. You are okay during the silence. You are okay after whatever comes. This does not mean you are unaffected. It means you are not undone. Jung would call this the emergence of the self, the center that holds, the part of you that is not dependent on external reflection to know that it exists. When this center is strong, you can love without desperation. You can want without need. You can wait without dying. The phone becomes a phone again. The person becomes a person again. And you become yourself again. Conclusion. You keep checking because some part of you believes that your worth is being negotiated in that silence, that your place in someone's mind is being decided by their response time, that your existence is only real when it is reflected back to you by the person you have chosen to need. But your worth was never in their inbox. Your importance was never in their reply speed. Your place in the world was never something they could grant or revoke with a text message. These things are yours. They belong to the self, and the self does not need a notification to know that it is here. The checking will not stop by force. It will stop by understanding, by seeing the projection, by meeting the shadow, by tolerating the uncertainty, by reclaiming the center that you abandoned when you handed your emotional weather to someone else's behavior. Carl Jung's psychology offers a way back, not to coldness, not to indifference, to presence, to the ability to care deeply without being destroyed by the silence, to the ability to want connection without being held hostage by its absence, to the ability to live your life while you wait, instead of putting your life on hold until the waiting ends. If this names something you have been doing without knowing why, subscribe to this channel. We explore the psychology behind the behaviors that control you. Like this video if you are ready to stop outsourcing your worth. Share it with someone who checks their phone too often, someone who needs to hear that the silence is not a verdict. Comment below with what you are afraid the silence means, not what you tell yourself, what you actually fear. Name it. Make it conscious, and watch it lose its power. Your phone is just a phone. The reply is just a reply. And you were already enough before it ever arrived. Goodbye.